Return on innovation, is it going to come, are the massive returns going to come from the Davids, from the small companies, from the Goliaths? Who's going to find ways of preventing cancer? Who's going to find ways of capturing gigatons of carbon? Who's going to give us flying cars? What we're talking about here for half an hour or so is innovations from small companies versus big companies, and where are the most exciting, profound innovations going to come from over the next 10 years or so that we're going to look back, and people like Ilya are going to be talking at Herb's 10th conference here about these amazing innovations. Will we be talking about what comes from small companies or large companies? Does anybody want to kick off on this? Emma, we were chatting about this earlier, weren't we?
And I think my perspective would be that large corporates and the ones that I work with as clients, their overriding drive, I guess, is usually a fear of failure. And certainly what prevents them getting new innovation to market is the fear that they get it wrong, or the fear that they'll burn a lot of money getting to the right one. And I think what I'm seeing increasingly is that they are working with different sizes of businesses to help them prototype, so to help them work out how you actually get this new innovation into market, how they can bypass their existing operating models and their existing systems to get innovation to market more quickly, more rapidly. But I would say there's a drive to share the pain. So they don't necessarily, they accept that they need to fail, but they don't want to pay the price of it. I think they're keen to work with their suppliers to do their test and learn, and learn with some of the smaller startups to get to the right product or service that they then want to go on and launch.
And that can be a win-win, can't it?
Yes, it can. Yes, it can, absolutely. And I think that's why I imagine you will have larger corporates who will build, who in effect create a platform or create the ecosystem on which other smaller companies find ways to still commercialise and find new sources of value. I think it will be a win-win environment that we see.
And it's interesting, Nigel, we were talking last night about your experience at Sage. Staggeringly large company, I had no idea how big they were, who manifestly didn't produce a platform. And do you feel would you feel Sage is an example of a company that failed to sort of build an ecosystem and failed to work with small companies?
I think one of the challenges that Sage has had is that it's grown so quickly. I started with Sage in 1993, and there were 400 employees, and when I left 10 years later, there were 14,000. That wasn't due to my intervention, by the way, I should say.
Well done.
But the rate of growth, I think, created real challenges for Sage. When I started, it was very entrepreneurial, innovative, if you like. If you didn't innovate, you didn't survive at Sage. So it was very much in the DNA. It was the way we did things. And as the business scaled, it reached the FTSE 100, naturally became more risk averse. And I think the challenge was to retain those attributes that made Sage successful in the first place in a changing marketplace. Sage has achieved significant market power. What the challenges it now has is to deal with a new cloud computing platform. And it'll be interesting to see whether it's actually created enough momentum from within to do the job, or whether it has to go out and acquire. And it's probably likely going to be a combination of the two. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of the innovation does come from outside. Larger companies find it very difficult to reinvent themselves, if you like, in the way that Emma was suggesting. There's fear of failure and personal risk. And do people feel empowered to stick their head up with the potential of failing is always a challenge. And I think Emma's suggestion of a combination of the two is absolutely right. I work as a small business. I see the other end of the scale, and trying to knock on the door and create partnerships with large organisations. And that brings its own challenges as well, picking the right ones who've actually got open ears and recognise they need external input to help them move forward.
So you're saying that when you're out there talking to these big companies, some of them are really open to working with startups like you, some aren't.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and it's hard to spot them because you need to be in at the right leadership level, and the people that are actually prepared to blaze a trail internally and kick down a few doors to make things happen, because there's a recognition they need external input. One of the challenges you have as an inventor, if you like, an innovator, is that there's a not invented here attitude sometimes, or a let's just take this and tweak it a little bit. So you get idea or concept dilution as you go into a large organization, which can kill it. And the need to pick a partner so you can actually preserve the value of what you've invented, which may be relatively subtle. It's not necessarily a piece of technology that does ABC. There may be subtleties around that a large organization may not get. And it's picking the partner that can actually take what you've got and help you grow it without snuffing it out. And I don't have the recipe for that, by the way. It's just a recognition.
I'm not sure there is any one recipe. Paul, you run a number of startups through the Ignite 100 incubator, don't you? And you know, I was looking over the website, and it's been going quite a while. You've had a lot of companies come through it. Do these sort of scrappy young startups typically want to do the kind of partnerships that Nigel's talking about and work with big corporates, or would they prefer to just go straight to the consumer and skip around the man?
B2C is really hard. Creating the next Facebook or Twitter, it's you look at the odds. I mean, you're looking at 1 in 100,000, 1 in a million. B2B is a much easier play for younger companies. So absolutely, they're looking for those partnerships. They're looking to introduce their technologies into established players and help them help solve problems which some of them aren't set up to do. I think that the bigger you get, you start creating these assets, and the more assets you have, then the harder you fight to keep them, because they're the things that generate profit. So there's no reason why the newspaper industry couldn't have created Craigslist, which undermined a massive amount of its profits in the end. There's no reason why the music industry couldn't have created Napster. And there's no reason why publishers couldn't have looked and challenged and championed ebooks. But they had all this money wrapped up in so many assets that it just didn't make that much sense to do that, because if they'd gone out and said, these are new technology, and if we start creating something interesting in this space, actually they're creating something that undermines their own profit. So it's not in their interest to do that. There's a big games development agency in London called Us2. They've done a lot of high-profile apps recently, but the bulk of their work, they're 200 people now, set up by 2 guys with £5,000 7 years ago. They're 200 people in 3 countries now, but they take 10% of their profits and put them into a small room of 15 people. Everyone else is building apps for Barclays and McDonald's and H&M, and they've just done the new operating system for the cheap tablets at Tesco. And that's what makes the money, because it's self-fulfilling. The bigger you get, the bigger contracts you have. But this small group of people get to sit in a room and frankly make anything they like, because they don't know what the next big thing is either. So they just experiment all day long. And actually, nearly everything's failed. But they're set up in a way to actually mine that innovation, and actually, if they come up with something, then that's the next
I think
thing.
it's interesting how you do that. I mean, there's various people try this internal sort of skunk works and internal incubators and things like that. And I mean, we did the same. Well, we did a variant of that in my company, Multimap. It can be quite a sensitive subject. Who gets to how you select those 15 people who work in the room? The project managers want to put the dull, the hopeless but popular developers in there, who it would be bad for morale to sack them, but nobody wants them on a project. So there's one argument to put them there. Anyway, I'm digressing now.
I was just going to pick up on this concept of skunkworks. Certainly, in the corporates that I've worked in, they work well for generating momentum within an organisation. So to galvanise some belief that you can do things differently. Where they have always failed, in my experience, is that it's actually the delivery of them and bringing them to market, where as a silo or an isolated function, they really struggle, because it's the point at which really you need to be galvanising other teams within the business to actually be able to get it live and get it to market. So I remember working in NatWest when we developed NatWest FastPay, and we launched it 2 months before PayPal, and it was PayPal. And we developed it in isolation. We tested it with those customers. It took us about a year to get a business case through the main organisation. And by that point, they had signed their deal with eBay. They were integrated within that platform. And my launch got culled for the launch of a new credit card.
And we all kind of understand that pressure in big corporates. And we all understand about these, these issues of, most little startups will fail. You have to, if you're really going to take an idea forward, you have to accept. I mean, what we did at Multimap in our innovation program, we said, we'll expect half of the projects we run through will never come to anything. And we actually didn't even define what coming to anything was. We thought, but it's acceptable for half to. But all your startups who come through Ignite, I mean, do you think the founders of them really believe that internally and think, well, actually, I've got a 95% chance of failure?
I'd hope they don't believe that. I think they realise it's it's a strong probability. The odds say it's going to happen, but I don't think startups in terms of technology are any different from any other startups anywhere else. They need to raise money to keep going. The biggest investment is people, but outside people, there's not much more that startups need. They all realise that failure is a strong probability. Our job is to hope that they're investment ready and less likely to fail. I think there's a worry for me in terms of startups that it's gone too far the other way. That failure, absolutely, you learn from it, and I don't think it should be shunned. But it's become almost a badge to wear to be able to fail, and it's become almost failure is actually what you're aiming for. And when you fail, it masks a lot of mistakes. And instead of owning up to the mistakes and actually saying it was a shit idea, badly executed, instead of spending the money on people, we had pool parties and got drunk a lot, instead of tackling the things, people are like, well, you failed twice, next time you'll be awesome. It's like, actually, next time you'll be rubbish as well. So I think failure shouldn't be the outcome. It should be still the unexpected thing, and you still should be in a position where you're building to succeed. I still don't think failure is acceptable.
Nigel, your startup's been going, you've been doing it, what, 2-3 years now?
About 3 years.
About 3 years.
Yes.
And it's quite successful now?
Yes.
How much has it changed from your original concept 3 years ago?
That's a very good question, because we operate a price comparison website for office supplies and stationery, and the innovation is that it compares the price of a basket of goods, because people buy stationery by chucking lots of things in a basket, and they don't want to compare pencils, pens and paper individually. So that's our innovation, and it makes sense, and it saves 25-30% on the average basket. The challenge that we've had, and so that's the first step of innovation, but the necessary next step has been around the branding and communication strategy. And it's worth stressing that in a conference like this, we tend to gravitate towards a technology solution when we talk about innovation. I think the branding and communication strategy needs to be just as innovative, potentially, to get you into the market. Stationery is a fairly unexciting domain to operate in. You're trying to capture the attention of people that are in a habit of doing things in a particular way. So you have to break that habit. And our success has actually started to come through the communication strategy, as people truly understand what we can give them. And that wasn't what I expected it to be 3 years ago.
Well, hopefully that's proof of Emma's point. I think our time is up, so thank you to the panel.